panel discussion and reception. Thank you so much for being here. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to introduce you to our new Chief Executive Officer and President, Carl Goodman. Carl, will you stand? We are all very delighted to have you join our team, and I'm sure he'll be around if you wanted to introduce yourself. If you have been to our events before, you know that I think it's very important to thank all of those people who make our events possible. So first, I'd like to acknowledge our board members who really do so much for this museum and dedicate a lot of time and energy to help it be successful. And I also want to thank our staff members, Miranda Brenner, who is our partnership and programs manager for organizing this event, and our AV team tonight, marketing manager David Myers, media producer Brett Henriksen, and IT manager Amy Baruch, who are milling about making sure that the technology will work. And of course, thank you to our volunteers who you met when you checked in, Mindy and Jeannie. Thank you so much. We are so grateful for all of our volunteers. They really make everything happen here at the museum. Finally, I want to acknowledge our Holocaust survivors, which of course is why this museum is here in St. Petersburg. I know we have at least one. Dr. Laris, would you stand and be recognized?
What did you call me?
Mr. Laris? Dr. Laris. So tonight's event will look a little different from some of the events that we normally do. This event will be in two parts. First, we're going to hear from Professor Rakhmiel Peltz, who will join us over Zoom. And then we will have a short panel discussion with the artist Toby Knobel Fluek's family, who will join me up front. And so now I get to introduce Dr. Rakhmiel Peltz. Professor Peltz has a PhD in cell and molecular biology from the University of Pennsylvania and a PhD in linguistics and Yiddish studies from Columbia. After a career as a lab bench scientist and teacher, he specializes now in the social history of Yiddish language and culture. He founded and directed the Judaic Studies program at Drexel University in Philadelphia, where he is also a professor of sociolinguistics. He authored From Immigrant to Ethnic Culture, American Yiddish in South Philadelphia, and co-authored Language, Loyalty, Continuity, and Change, and was producer and project director of the film Toby's Sunshine, The Life and Art of Toby Knobel Fluek, and is the author of the educational website Alive, Educational Restitution After Genocide. He previously was professor at Boston University and Columbia University, and served as visiting professor at the New School in Wesleyan, Mount Holyoke, the University of Massachusetts, and YIVA. So please welcome Dr. Peltz.
Thank you, Erin. It's great to be here. My connection to the museum actually goes back 23 years ago. My uncle, Dr. Abraham Levine, was a longtime resident of Clearwater, a supporter of the museum, a pioneering podiatrist in the area. And he and Liesl Schick, one of the builders of the museum, who sadly passed away this past year, invited me and my family, my children, my wife, when we were visiting, to visit the museum. That was my first time. My second time around was in 2006, when the museum had its first exhibition on the art of Toby Fluek. It was about 60 works in one large gallery, and it was the most impressive showing of her art that I had ever seen. And I came down. Toby was, I believe, ill at that time, and I became the speaker, and I was able to work with Erin on that program. So Erin and I go back fairly far. Most recently, or more recently, I encouraged the Finklers, Toby's daughter and her family, to donate the art to the museum. And here we're seeing the first exhibition of her work. I'm certain that there are going to be many more, and also educational programs. So my job tonight is to set a context for the artwork and to stress the educational message that this artwork carries with it, its unique educational message. I had a 10-year relationship with Toby Fluek, a kind of love affair. It was mostly over the telephone. She was in Queens Village and I was in Philadelphia, and we would speak in Yiddish over the phone. But in making the film about her, and that grew out of her coming to Drexel, I actually had known about her and was, we could say, mesmerized by her appearance in the film Image Before My Eyes, which is actually the best documentary on any subject in Jewish history. And Toby's was the first vignette. But it turns out we got to know each other, and of course we had things in common, including the fact that both of us had shared a mentor in Lucian Dobrashitsky, who, when I went back to Yiddish studies, although he's a Holocaust historian and a survivor born 1 year before, he's no longer with us, before Toby, he became my major mentor as I studied also at YIVO. And he also was very encouraging of Toby to present her work and to publish her work. He was an outstanding individual who, as we know, was, lived long enough to be thrown out of Poland by Gomulka in '68 to come and put together with Barbara Kirschenblatt-Gimblett the collection Image Before My Eyes that eventually became this outstanding film that was written by Jerome Badanes and was directed by Josh Waletsky, where Toby stars in the first scene. Well, as Toby says, I ended up spending 6.5 years making a film about Toby Fluek. I'll never make another film again. It's so hard to do a film. I can recall the first luncheon when she came to Drexel to speak, and we said, oh, these art books are going to go out of print. Let's make a film, so that'll be here forever. Well, it almost took forever to make the film, but certainly it was worth it. We hired professionals, and the way we did it at the end was we drove the message of the art through music, which we recorded on our own, mostly Yiddish and Hebrew music. When I showed this film about Toby Fluek to my students in courses, at the end, I always ask them, what do you want to see more of? What did I leave out? What's the kind of message that you'd like to see more of? And interestingly, most of my students are not of Jewish background and do not know any Yiddish. Each time they say, we want to see more of the survivors, and we want to see and hear more Yiddish. So to open this talk, which is mainly about people and culture, as we are taught about these people and culture by Toby Fluek, I decided to show 2 film clips from the project. They're not in the film. In the first film clip that we're going to show you, you're going to see the dramatis personae of Toby and her husband, Max Flug, who sadly died in the first few years of our working on this film. And they're bantering and fooling around. They're talking about how they met up in the DP camps and got married and came to America in 1950. This is all in Yiddish with subtitles. The second, a shorter one, one is 10 minutes, one is 4 minutes, is a snippet of a conversation of a bunch of Holocaust survivors at their bungalow colony, Toby Fluek's bungalow colony, in Woodburn, New York, in the Catskills, talking to each other in Yiddish about what their legacy is for their children. And after we show these films, I'm going to come back, but I want to remind you that, as we say in Yiddish, the rozhinke of the evening, the special nature, the most exciting, delicious part of the meeting is going to be the last part of the meeting where you meet the Finkler family, because this is the real message of how we go from generation to generation. People have been mourning. They said, what are we going to do when the survivors are gone? Well, we have the Finklers, and they show that it's carrying the survivor's story, but not the same way that the survivors carried it, but in their own way from generation to generation. It's not easy, but it can be done, and it can be done very naturally. This is the basic education project that we see going from generation to generation, and you're going to be, I'm sure, at the end of the evening convinced that we're not going to be losing this story. So I'll be back, and let's look at this bunch of survivors. Thank you.
Wer soll heute so pakken?
Het is geen Pesach. Een hospital had een bestemd 45 zijden. Had mij geen dat 5 patients, ze 4 zijden. Zeer aangevallen man groepen.
Beide sind hier gewesen ins Spital zusammen.
Hier bin ich gewesen, ich bin hier gearbeitet.
Was hat hier getan?
Am Maskier.
Ein Skier.
Ich hätte mir nicht gekommen.
Ich bin gewesen.
Sie gekommen zu der Mama.
Ja, ich bin gewesen. Meine Mama gewesen in dem Spital.
Ah, wo ist das gewesen?
Bad Werreshofen. Sie gehen nach
Wo ist
Ronischer
das?
Hospital in Deutschland. Sie gehen nach Ronischer Hospital. Ist meine Mama hat mich geschickt dort, ob ihr gesagt, ich fuhren dort, wie man schickt sie, aber ihr will mich nicht zerteilen. Weil haben sie mal gelassen sein dort in dem Hospital.
Wie alt seid ihr gewesen?
Und damals bin ich schon in der 20. No, das ist gewesen in, ja, bin schon gewesen
20 Jahre? Ja.
Ich bin mehr.
21.
Nun, als ihr habt ihr der Sendung bekannt?
Na, weil das nicht.
Nee?
Also der Zeitung.
Na, der Zeit so.
Is wat aangesetzt de vierde te doen.
Ja.
Aangesetzt die mensen, bij die mensen conducten zeiden, die conducten zeiden. Zeer aangevallen in die groep aan, 4 gebroken conducten zeiden. Je dood gewin de rabbi, de roef. Had ik gezegd, weet je hoe staat zich de smeidler in draaien zich alleen. Opgassen. Zijn ze bekend.
Hat etwas,
Übergelost etwas?
Übergelost etwas. Es wenn ungefähr dem Seide, es bin ich gewesen dort die jüngste, hab ich aufgemacht, der Tia von Elianovi. Und hat mir damals bemerkt, du hast gewesen, eine schöne Kabuche. Und da gehabt eine Landsfrau dort, und da erzählt, das nicht erzählt Mrs. Koch, und du wirst mich bekennen?
Sie hat mir vorgestellt.
Das haben gewollt schatren, sie haben es gewollt verschatren. Because hier bin ich gewesen, da einzige, ich gewesen noch ein Mädel dort. Es gewesen ein paar Buchieren dort, und es gewesen andere Ältere. So, sie haben gemeint, reinzumachen dem Schiddach. So, you know, er macht nicht gewollt, Frage für ein Date. So, die Landsfrau hat mir erzählt, zuerst habe ich nicht gewollt, aber dann noch so wie ich habe erzählt bevor, als Mädel ist weggefahren kann Amerika. Sie kommen in New York, hat sie geschrieben zu der Harvard, sagt sie, ja, dort eine Gelegenheit, Hassen zum Ort Hassen, because sie hat kommen in Amerika, schwer zu treffen, ein jüdischen Buch. Das Stutt ist so groß. Weil sie gewesen, die ersten paar Wochen in der Stutt in New York. Aber ich habe noch jemand den Bereich, ich schon so nach York, klären Hassen zum. So, der Sache, ich bin ein schämlicher Buch, ist die Frau, hat mir vorgeschlagen, sie geht mit mir im Park. Met zich treffen met een Husenbucher. Und dann so ich gewesen, so ich im Park sitzen, sieht im ganzen bestellten Soldaten sitzen. Ich habe sich also getroffen, also immer umgehalten zu...
Den ist schön, was ich erzählt. So, ab Hassenjahr, ich komme zu von Amerika. Hier habe ich einen harten Tag geriefen, sie Bälle Kie.
Oh, hinter Ihnen. Please.
Wo ist? Hassan kommt heran, sagt sie, sagst du, mein Wab, das kann ich dir vorstellen, mein Mann geht zu ihr und sagt, Ton, Schiff, wusste getan. Wusste Hassen gehabt. Was gewinnt gekommen in Amerika, was gewinnt genommen ein Millionär. Sie sagt, die Millionären wollen sich herum, sie warten auf grüne Mädchen Hassen zu. Und von damals so, hassen sie.
Aber sie doch schon gewinnt auch die meiste, ihr hat schon kein Meure nicht gedacht, Tom, weil ihr seid schon gewinnt Hasne, ja.
Nein, aber verwusst hat sie...
Aber was ja so
gesagt.
Ja, ich verstehe.
Sind nicht das so exactly. Das ist so,
Das hat
ich
gerne
gesagt,
geschreit,
mit mir
Tonche, wusste getan, wusste Hassen gehabt. Was gewinnt gekommen in Amerika, was gewinnt genommen ein Millionär.
Okay, that's it. No more.
Wenn ihr Hasne gehabt, ist die Mama gewesen dabei?
Ja,
Genau.
Mama, das ist ja noch eine Sache. Mama hat übergelebt in Malchome. Und sie wäre so, sie gewinnt damals ein Hospital. Danach ist die Mama weggefahren in Amerika und sie, als sie gewinnt krank, hat sie gekonnt fahren mit der Airplane. Sie geflogen und dann ist mir gedacht, kommen mit dem Schiff, because der Airplane gewinnt bloß für kranke Menschen.
Sie hat schon Hasne gehabt?
Ich bin nicht gewinnt nach Hasne gehabt, ich bin gewinnt verlobt. So, und die Mama ist weggefahren, dass sie gewinnt arrangiert mit den Doktoren, als der Doktor gesagt hat, die einzige Sache, was sie konnten eine Chance zu fahren, ist mit der Airplane. Und das sie gewinnt bestellt. Also. Und dann sind wir geblieben. Es hat geheißen, als wir kommen, nur wenn wir mit uns riefen, wenn wir tun den Transport mit dem Schiff, und wir kommen in Amerika, ich stelle nach Rippe, Hassan in Amerika. Meine Mama, sie kommen zu den Brüdern, sie hat uns erzählt, hat sie gehört, wie der Spruch redet, Hassan kostet das auch Geld in Amerika. Und die Mama,
Das zeige ich schon ganz.
lass mich händigen. Und die Mama geschrieben einen Brief zu mir, mein Kind, stell dich Hippe dort, weil bei Kasten Amerika kostet das auch Geld. Kassen und so. Und dann sind wir gewesen so naiv, aber mit nicht berechnet. Wir konnten doch kommen in Amerika, ganz nach Araber, stell dich Hippe. No, die Mama hat das geschrieben, sind wir gegangen. In fact, eine Bekannte in Zere, bin der ganze Nähe, sie so zusammen in der Viereke. Genia Prava. So man kommt zu ihr, sagt sie, jetzt ich sage, die Ostrassen bei mir Stieb, die kann mir gar nicht zu der Arbeit, nach Arbeit kommen sie in den Stieb. Noch eine Sache wegen der Frau. Die Frau war gemietet in einer zweiten Spital, wo ihre Schwester gewinnt Spital, meine Mama gewinnt im selben Spital. Sie gewinnt wie ein Sanatorium. Pflege ich dort wohnen, private, ich denke in ein Zimmer. Und ich pflege jeden Tag kommen, sehen die Mamen und die Freude. So pflege ich eine Sache mal raufbringen, Sachen, Tinteures, etwas ankaufen auch. Pflege sie mir alle mal sagen, oh ja, ich mache abdienen, es da hassen.
Sie der Zeit sie wrong.
So du ein Bier, also, der Mann sagt eine Sache, der Mann sagt etwas.
Wusste Zeit sie. Die Mädel hat geschrieben einen Brief, ich höre aus meinem Kind. Ob Hassene, weil in Amerika ist schwer, kostet Sachgeld.
Ja, ne.
Ich habe mir gestellt eine Kippe. Und sie mir gewöhnt zusammen ein paar Monaten. Ich komme in Amerika. Sagt die Schwieger, abhassen, also man hassen gehabt in Deutschland. In
Deutschland?
In Deutschland haben wir hassen gehabt.
Nee.
Dann komme ich in Amerika, auf der Schiff. Jetzt sagt, was ich hassen gehabt und alles. Das zeige ich dort hin. Sagt sie, was kann ich hassen du? Wusste hassen gehabt, ich habe es. Schreit sie, gewaltig geschrien, wusste getan. Wusste hassen gehabt, das kann ich hassen gehabt mit einem Millionär.
Gypsy zurück zu derselben Mann, so schön das dritte Mal. Now, die Frau, aber in Kimmel nehmen sie für eine Interfereke. Du sie gewähnt ihre Schwester und die Frau, sie gewähnt zwei Schwestern, aber sie gewähnt. Haben sie beide gesagt, ich mache ob die ihnen zu deinem Haus. Hat sie ungebacken ein Cake, aber nicht mehr geschlafen dort. Sie hat ungebacken ein Cake und sie hat draufgenommen ein Hering, sie hat marinierte Hering. Und sie hat geborgt eine weiße Bluske mit einer Spodnitze. Ich habe getrunken ein weißes Kleid und die weiße Bluske mit der Veil. alle Meidler von dem Lager dort, von dem DP-Camp, alle getrokken die Bluske mit der Bespunnitze, zum Hasnigat in dem. Und sie hat gebringt dem Rabbi bei Nacht, mit gestellter Heppe, mit gesetzen gerade Sede. Und das sie gewesen ist. Sie gewesen.
Die Hasene.
Habe ich came true, als sie ist mit ihm geworden, ja. Was
het gewollt euch
Sie ist gekommen in Amerika, die Frau?
Ja, sie gekommen in Amerika, leider. Die Schwester hat gelebt ein paar Jahre und sie gestorben, sie gewinnt sehr krank. Sie war eine Mädel eigentlich. Und die Frau hat immer ungehalten, die Freundschaft, die ganze Zeit. Sie ist gestorben ein paar Jahre zurück.
In uncles and aunts, we can es vergessen. But I wish, als die Kinder, unsere Kinder, in der Einigkeit, als sei so ein Gedenken, was hat passiert.
Was meint ihr, darf man erzählen, die Kinder?
Man darf da reinzureden zu sei. In ich sage eine Sache, zu jedem Will, was man schreibt hinter, darf man reinzulegen ein Zettel. Aufschreiben genau, was hat uns passiert, als sei so ein Gedenken, als eine allein in dem Will, sollen sie gedenken, oh, meine Eltern, meine Seite sind gewesen in Concentration Camp, sie gewesen, das hat passiert in Deutschland, die in die Jahre. Und jetzt, das ist die einzige Sache, was man kann selber lassen. Hitzen Geld darf man das selber lassen.
Das hat man sich nicht gehabt.
Aber die Kinder?
Ich glaube nicht, dass die Kinder ever vergessen, als die Eltern sind gewesen in Concentration Camp. Sie haben sich gesehen in der Mitte des Lebens, in der Fuß des Lebens, wie sie haben gesoffen, als die Kinder so ever keine vergessen ist. Das ist impossible.
Wie haben Sie das gelernt? Ihr habt sie erzählt?
Heute haben sie nicht wenig, aber sie nicht gewollt zeigen. Später an haben sie gelesen Bücher und sie nicht wenig sehr beiß, verwusst sie nicht die Zeit. Was hat gesagt so? Die Zeilen eng kann auch geben eng noch mehr Zures und mehr Sorgen, was Enkeleltern haben mitgemacht. Was jetzt, als sie lest schon, das Kind schon sehen allein, was sie mitgemacht. Dann muss der Bücher in die Zeilen, aber die Storys, was sie jetzt liest, sind sehr wenige beschrieben, was sie richtig mitgemacht. Because das, was sie mitgemacht, kann nicht werden beschreibt.
Das ist alles.
Steven Spielberg, ich bin gewonnen approached bei Steven Spielberg's Company. Und ich habe gemacht 2 Tapes. Und die 2 Tapes haben sie gefilmt. Habe ich gelassen, meine Kinder jeden einen noch geben Copies von den 2 Tapes. Und ich habe gesagt, gedenkt. Und Lillian, als ich gestorben, sollst du es geben, deine Kinder in so ein Gedenken, so ein ja, kick, wenn sie euch sehen, wo ist dein Grandpa oder ist doch gegangen durch die Zeit, was hat passiert. Und ich denke, jeder eine von uns, ob er das nicht gemacht, darf es still zu machen.
Aber die Kinder haben gewusst, dass sie sind anders. Ja, weil
Yes.
die Amerikaner-Kinder,
Yes.
alle haben gesagt, sie sind Bubis.
Right.
Und die Kinder
ist
haben
right.
in der Fall nicht gehabt.
Das
No,
ist es.
No.
Das ist es.
Ja.
Schwester und Brüder,
Ja.
beide sind Bubis und Väter sind
Meine Söhne, meine Kinder haben nicht kennengelernt, seine Eltern, nicht der Eltern von meiner Frau.
Wann kommt ihr?
Częstochowa.
Und wie alt seid ihr gewesen, wenn ihr seid...
So hast du gut?
Ob ihr will?
Eine Frau sagt nicht Deutsch.
Ihr könnt ja nur sagen, liegen, aber das ist noch zum Liegen.
Wie alt bin ich gegangen in den Krieg? 16 Jahre.
Und was haben die Eltern getan? Mit was haben sie sich vernommen in die Jahren vor dem Krieg?
Ich komme von einer kleinen Städte,
Ja.
nicht groß. Man hat gehandelt, mit was sie sind gekommen, hat man gehandelt. Und
Beide
dem hat man
Eltern,
gelebt.
der Tate mit der Mama oder nur der Tate?
Nicht der Tate. Tate gesitzt und gelebt.
Ah, er hat eine fromme Stube. Ja.
So where we cut off, as you see, where the survivor friend of Toby is crying when she thinks about her and talks about her lost father, we come to a couple of the unique aspects of Toby's message. And what I think she means when we end the film that we made, and she says, I had a message to share. The difficulty in recounting and looking at the loss itself, the parents that were lost, the people, the life that was lost, is sometimes, this is my first thesis, is sometimes much more difficult to do than to recount the story of what happened in the Holocaust years itself. In our work in Holocaust education, very often, we focus in on what happened to you from the beginning of the war to the end. And I actually had an argument, or I was berated by the director of education who retired already at Yad Vashem, who, when I told him I'm interviewing Holocaust survivors and talking about their life before the war, he said, how can you do that? You have to first focus in on what happened, their unique story of what happened to them during the war. But I have a friend, Alan Rosen, who's a Holocaust researcher, and he said, you know, the only difference between the Holocaust survivors and the people who succumbed is that the Holocaust survivors are lived. So they have still, there are informants of the world of the people who succumbed. Somehow or other, Toby Fluek understood that. And I remember introducing her at the first lecture at Drexel, where Lily came and my colleague Adina Simmet and David walked over with his friends from Penn and the Holocaust Education Committee. And I described Toby Fluek as telling us the story of the whole Holocaust survivor before the war, during the war, after the war. Which doesn't seem so special, but I think largely, sometimes or very often, we forget that more difficult loss. And specifically focus in on the survivors as only being of educational value for telling us their Holocaust story. Fortunately, my children are grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. My wife, Hannah's parents, went through all the stations of the Holocaust. From her mother, Tzolangi Yor, yesterday celebrated her 102nd birthday in Holon, Israel. And she always would say, I wasn't born in Auschwitz. And I think that Toby has underscored that kind of lesson. And my second thesis is that all of us, everyone, but especially all Jews, are survivors, basically. And when we started, my students and I started studying genocides in general, we saw, whether it's Rwanda, the former Yugoslavia, Native Americans, the hardest thing is to teach about the world that was lost. And Jews with their day school still don't know how to do that. And I, listening and being near Toby, finally sort of came to these basic kind of resolutions, because I was always struggling. Why is nobody interested in Yiddish culture? Well, it's very hard to face that world that is lost, even for the descendants who internalize themselves as being capable of having been thrown into ovens, whether you're living in California or in South Africa or whatever. And I think that that's where we can be especially grateful to Toby and her message and how she leads the way. And we see that, I think, in many different places, starting from Image Before My Eyes in that first vignette, where Toby represents the least typical living environment for Jews before the war, right? An agricultural village, a dorf, of a few, 10 Jewish families, right? Amongst probably 1,000 people, Ukrainians and Poles. there's a neighboring shtetl with 2,000 people, 1,000 Jews, and the social structure is so different from the dorf. But the message that Toby has to tell us is a message that the whole people share, and that we can treasure, and that is so meaningful. So basically, I took this first vignette and turned Toby Fluek into Miss Jewish Poland, and she is Miss Jewish Poland. So we first have her in the image before my eyes, and then we have her, we should mention, in 2 books that she published, by these beautiful art books by Knopf. 1990 and 1992. The first one, Memory of My Life in a Polish Village, 1930 to 1949. And the second one, Passover as I Remember It. Well, I was living with my family, my wife, my 2 Holocaust survivor grandchildren, little kids. And on the main street in one of the bookstores, those books appeared in 1990 and 1992, and I bought them for my children and for my son Ellie and my daughter Bina. And Bina always takes credit for the film on Toby Fluek. She said, "You took that book off of my shelf, and that's how you were able to make this film." And then I think we can see in the film, through the music and through the artwork, Toby's lasting message, and then in this website that we created also. I now want to for a moment, because I want you to get to know the Finklers and spend time with them, have some idea of how the museum's collection and exhibition that you're going to see in the gallery relates to the larger oeuvre. What's missing here, and what's complemented, and in many ways it has to do with the medium that was used, and especially if we could think of iconic Toby Fluek, we think largely, especially in the autobiographical first book, of these oils with the vibrant colors describing Jewish holidays and her life in the village. You're going to see only a little bit of that outside. Someday that we're going to have other exhibitions with other of the holdings, and you'll get to and the art that's not in the museum's holdings, and get a feeling for that. There certainly is a question of medium. In the second book, it's all watercolors, the Passover book, and you're going to see more of the watercolors out in the galleries. And the third kind of medium were the charcoals. Now, Toby says, well, by the time I get to do the war years, I was allergic to oil, so I had to use charcoals. Well, the black and white of the charcoals conveys, obviously, the somber tones of the experience and the feeling of the war years. And I don't think it's just because of her allergy. As Lily says, it was hard for Toby to deal with the war years. What's so attractive about the oils? And I think, first of all, Toby's use of light, where the natural light is coming from, is amazing and so talented. And the different hues of the colors. As Toby tells us in her autobiography, as we're filming, she says, we were invited, a bunch of kids, we had to go to class, and the teacher said, bring in the branch of a cherry tree. And we're going to do some painting, we're going to do some artwork. So we brought branches of the cherry tree, we start drawing, and all the kids do a plain brown and a plain green. But Toby saw all the different layers of brown and layers of green and variants of the colors, and crimson, as she would say. So from the beginning, her eye was different. She looked at the world differently and was more analytic and took things apart. And she was a natural artist and conveyed this, and especially with her use of sunlight and lighting that stresses life. And I think that people just react to those depictions and love the fact that even though she doesn't shirk death, we see out there, you're going to see the hospital burning in the Broda ghetto, and where her sister Lechik dies. But the other thing that people want to see is the life, being alive, and that transmission of Jewish culture as being alive. And Toby always says, she loves the Passover Seder, and she loved how her husband, how her father chanted the Haggadah, and she says, my husband chants it just the exact way. And that chanting goes from generation to generation. So I think that was her gift. Her gift was a gift about living. There's going to be many topics for us to discuss in future exhibitions, in future educational programs. Things are not simple in Toby's setting, in the village there, that we don't get into. But historically, we know now, at the end of the war, when Toby was in the year of hiding, the Jews were inconsequential. Most of the local fighting was between the Poles and the Ukrainians. And we have that in a couple of clips on my website of other people who suffered tremendously, basically, because the Ukrainians were trying to get rid of the Poles who had lived there in Chernivtsi for hundreds of years. And at the end of the war, that's exactly what happened. So things are complicated, and we'll get to this maybe in future studies. In 2006, when I was at the Holocaust Museum and I came down to St. Petersburg, there was a fellow, a young Ukrainian man from Broda, from the town nearest the city, the small city nearest to Toby, a young Ukrainian who was brought to America by the Ukrainian church in Connecticut, sent to high school, and then sent to Boston College. He was doing a master's degree. He looked at the title of Toby's book, My Youth in Poland, from 1926. He said, what Poland? This is occupied Ukraine. So we see there is always contested more nuance that we have to get to. But I think for the meanwhile, what we see is that this art is about life. This art is about people. This art is about a living culture. And now we can continue to see that, I think, and you're going to get to see it and hear it in the testimony of Toby's daughter, son-in-law, their children, and their grandchildren. Remarkable story. So thanks a lot for inviting me.
Professor Peltz. So I'm going to invite the Finkler family to come up and take a seat. And while they make their way up here, I just wanted to add a little bit to what Professor Peltz was talking about. So as he said, we had an exhibition here in 2006, 2007. And when it was here, it was a real, or at least the feedback I received was that it was a real docent favorite and a favorite amongst our visitors and student groups. And so when she called me, really called me in, I think it was 2017, and asked me if we would be interested in a donation of this collection. She was looking at us, and she was looking at EVO and some other organizations to which to donate this collection to. I was so excited, and I would have probably begged, but I just the opportunity to be steward to this collection and to be able to assist in telling her story is really important to this institution. So thank you for that. And what's even more special is that after they made the decision to donate the collection, I was able to spend a couple days in New Jersey to see it all and kind of do an inventory with the family before shipping it here, and spent time with Lillian and Steve, and they are really the most wonderful people. Not only generous with their time and this collection, they're life members of the Florida Holocaust Museum, which is pretty amazing. And they really understand the importance of sharing these stories. So thank you for being here. Thank you for everything. So I'm going to ask a few questions, and then the family's going to pass it down the line.
Interrupt, guys.
So Lily, growing up as a child of survivors, how was your life different from other kids your age, from your friends?
You know, I never thought I was different. I was an all-American kid. And then I realized that my parents came here in 1950. I only spoke Yiddish. Yiddish was my mama Lushan. That was the first language I spoke till I was like 5 years old, and we realized I had to go to kindergarten. So I better learn English. And they sent me to a nursery program. And I never realized my parent had accents. Steve, my husband, said my father had a thick accent. I never heard it. I never realized. My mother spoke English a little bit better, but he says she still had an accent. I didn't think so. I played piano as a child, but I played Yiddish. We had a Yiddish songbook. I played Yiddish songs. We would sing along. I'd play, she and I would sing Mr. Shane, and that was just what we did. I didn't have any aunts or uncles or cousins. That's very typical. Although I did have a surviving grandmother. My grandmother survived in the same village, and that was very unusual. My parents mostly socialized with other Grine, and they would get together with the kids. We'd sit around, and they'd serve potatoes and herring as a treat. No coffee and cake. That was it. I never went trick-or-treating on Halloween. I once asked my mother, and she says, no, on Purim you get dressed up. You say, Heinz is Purim, morgen is os, give me a grosh and a bath, today's Purim, tomorrow's not, give me a penny and throw me out. I just, Thanksgiving wasn't a big holiday for us. I didn't have a lot of family. So the three of us would go out to the local deli. If you'd have a turkey sandwich. And my father was off from work that day, so it was a big deal. Yiddishkeit was who they were. I mean, it was part of their life. It was just part of the family. It ran through everything.
So about the use of Yiddish in your home growing up, how did that carry over when you raised your children?
Did it?
This is a grandchild, not a child.
I'm Max, and so my dad would sing to me this Yiddish lullaby that his grandmother or that you sing to him and that your grandma sing to you.
Yeah, it's a lullaby about it's a very specific in time. It's a Yiddish lullaby about coming to America, and that what will happen in America, I'll make you chicken soup, and in America, they have challah, they bake challah every day of the week, and it is a very, I think, very unique and of a certain era that we're still singing Yiddish lullabies to our children. So.
I Lulu, I Lulu. Every time I said I Lulu, they said no, I Lulu. Then you want to go
Josie sings it. She sings it a lot. You want to sing it with me?
Yeah.
Lily, why do you think your mother started to paint, and then how did she get her books published? I know Professor Peltz talked a little bit about that. But
my mother, as Professor Peltz, was very artistic as a child, and they really couldn't send her to an art school. I mean, from a farm village to art school wasn't happening. And then the war started. She started painting probably late 1950s, early 60s. And at one point, my grandmother, who was living with us, asked her to paint a picture of her farm. And she did. That's the first painting you see in the exhibit. It's a pencil, a colored pencil drawn. And after that, she started painting things she remembered from her childhood. She would paint brooms and baskets and eggs and beets and water spilled and eggs. And this is what she remembered from her childhood. She did that in oils. And I really do think that she couldn't paint in oils after a while because it was very toxic. But that's another story. And at one point, someone said, Tanya, you have a book. And so she started drawing more of the Holocaust paintings. It was very difficult for her. It's hard to remember. It's hard to put that in an art form. It's a very, very painful thing. And that's why she, okay.
Is there a story behind the how of publishing the book?
Yes, she networked with everyone. She spoke to everyone about her art and her story. A cousin of a cousin connected her with a literary agent. They went through several publishers who always rejected her. Finally, the last one they were going to, Knopf, accepted her book, and it was published. It was amazing. My mother was only finished 8th grade, and she asked me to write the story at first, and I couldn't write because I liked the Yiddish tom that she would put into her writing, and I couldn't replicate that. And so I had her write it, and then I would correct it a little bit, But
And by the way, we have some copies of both books there. We're not selling them, but just if anybody wants to see them, you're welcome to go and take a look at them. So I always say her books have a little paragraph at each page, and I love it because I've written books like 1,000 pages. I say I like hers much better.
And she worked at it. This is not like she drew 10 paintings and the book was published. She at the bungalow colony, those people who were talking, she would talk to she didn't have time to play cards. Everyone played cards in the afternoon. She didn't have time for that. She said, I have important things to do. I have to draw and I have to write my memories. And she did that. But she would talk to the people and reaffirm her memories of how life was in the old country. She networked with everyone. She spoke to everyone, and she charmed everyone. She was very charming, my mother. She was very social and very charming. And so much to our amazement, they published the book, and it's incredible.
And unfortunately, it's out of print, but maybe we'll get around that someday.
Yeah, eBay has them, but
So you grew up with her painting all the time, it sounds like. How did your mother's artwork affect you, whether it was the images of her life before the war or those more difficult images of her experience during the Holocaust?
When I was young, my parents didn't talk about the war. They didn't talk about the Holocaust. But as I got older, first of all, her paintings filled the house. There wasn't an empty wall space. The hallway down to the bedrooms was filled with paintings, double top and bottom on both sides of the wall. When I moved out, that bedroom became filled with paintings all over the wall. It was just part of the house, part of her story. And this is how she expressed herself through her art. They didn't talk a lot about the war, but she certainly painted about it. And she painted about life before the war. And she remembered that. It's amazing that she had the memory to recreate that life and remember all the details of it. And she used to set up, a broom and a bottle. She said she had a friend dress up in a long skirt and bend over a certain way so she could copy that look. And that's how she did it.
Your mother has given testimony to the Shoah Foundation, and we heard about the films that have been created either about her or with her in it. How do you think her artwork differs from that sort of testimony?
Differs from the testimony. Her artwork is a visual representation. It's one thing to read about it and think about it. It's another thing to actually see the images and know that this happened to a real person. I mean, this isn't a general 6 million people were killed. This is my mother's story. This is her family background. It is, it remembers the happier times in her life, the sweet times in their lives that was lost and ended because of the war, because of the Holocaust. As an artist, it's a personal remembrance of what she went through and what she had before. And it's really almost like two pieces, the before the war and all the remembrance of all the things that made important. I mean, as a child, you remember egg picking and baskets and stuff. And after the war, during what happened to her family and how their lives were shattered. I mean, you get to see the real people there. This is not a general story. This is my mother. This is the lady you saw up on the film. And this is her story.
Amazing. And this is exactly how our museum teaches the lessons of the Holocaust. So I understand that your children and grandchildren wanted to add some remarks and that you're going to introduce your husband, who's already spoken, but.
Grab the mic.
Actually, he was the one who, I had the paintings all in the house, all in a big bookcase, and I have them shelved, and he urged me to please give them, not give them away, but put them someplace where they will be appreciated and exhibited and shown and shared. And that's what we did. That's Steve.
So Dr. Peltz was talking about how your mother liked the way her father did Seder, and she liked that Max did it the same way. One of the things Lil did when her father passed, because he always led at least the beginning of our Seders. Can you do a little bit of it? No. So after he passed, she started doing the beginning of our Seder in the Yiddish sort of accent of her father.
Yeah, I would always do the Kiddush because it's now we say Baruch Atah. It's Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagofen, etc., etc.
So one of the things Dr. Peltz was showing a lot of in the clip was how they got engaged and married in the DP camp. But when you go out there, you're not going to see a picture of them getting married at the DP camp. Now, can anyone here think why there's no picture in the museum? Max, do you know why there's no picture in the museum of Toby getting married at the DP camp? Where might that be?
Oh, probably your house.
No.
It's our
house.
You never noticed?
Oh, that's
Yeah, we have the painting.
This is David.
My name is David. I'm the oldest son. We have the painting up in our house, and we had a lot of connection to that painting. It was our save the date for our own wedding. We had my bubby's painting of her getting married under the DP camp as the save the date because it really resonates with us, and it is something that is like a layer of continuity between us and our family.
So David, while you have the mic, what connections do you feel between your bubby's pre-life war and your life, other than what you've already alluded to?
Well, what Dr. Peltz talked about a little bit about how she was in a village and she wasn't a very common thing, and a lot of the differences in our lives are very apparent. Is that we don't put a fresh layer of mud on our floor for Passover in order to get ready, and we don't bake challahs anymore. But we do like clean for Passover and eat challah and say the prayers over that. No, I'm talking about for every week on Shabbos we eat challah.
We're talking about Passover.
So, but we have a painting of her baking challah with her mother, and we do continue with the rituals. And I think that that's the thing that it doesn't even stand out to me when I first was thinking about this. But what is the legacy of my grandmother is obviously these beautiful paintings that she shared with everyone, but also the Yiddishkeit, the rituals that don't seem strange to me. There's a picture downstairs of her sister waving a chicken around her head, floating the forest, which is a ritual you do before Yom Kippur. It's an atonement ritual, and we don't do a chicken above our head, but we do it with money, and it doesn't seem strange to me. But my wife is like, that's not something that everyone does. But the continuity is that the same seasons, the same weekly rituals that her family did, the same holidays that her family did, they're also really central in our lives. They're the way that we structure our lives as well. And same thing with lifetime. That the bar mitzvahs, the bris, the weddings are the same celebrations that we do today. So even though, and that's not just from her, that's from my grandmother, but it's also from my parents, is that this is something that is just obvious to me that this is a lot of this stuff doesn't seem weird. It seems like just the way things are, because I've had this legacy passed down from my parents to me.
Okay, so Gary, you actually this is our younger son at the bar, you actually became a professional artist. So what do you want to say about Bubby influenced your life?
Well, for starters, when I was a kid, I always loved to draw. And I remember we used to go up, as you saw, to the bungalow colony during the summer, and we would do different activities. But aside from things like berry picking and other fun things we would do with her, I remember she would sit at a table and draw with me, and that's kind of like the early memories. Just starting out at just drawing, and she would give me little pointers. Oh, try this, try that, and she would teach me. I don't remember all those little details, but I have this memory that we did it, and I think that's really special. Later on, though, people would always say, "Oh, you have this talent as an artist. Get that from your grandmother," and that made me feel, that made me feel good. That made me feel special, feel a connection. But when I actually, when I went to film school to study animation, and when I started working as a graphic designer and animator, I think that even more so than people saying that connection, that actual connection to her, being able to do something for a career that was something so special for her, something that that Toby was so talented at. I think that was what was really special for me, had that connection through the art. And my mother mentioned the artwork on the walls in her apartment. I actually, after I graduated from college, I was looking for somewhere to live, and Toby was going down to Florida for a good portion of the year. And so there was space there, and I lived in her apartment for a little while, and we overlapped for just a little bit. I wish it had been more, but I remember as a kid walking down those halls and seeing all the artwork on the walls, and then living there, walking down the halls, and the artwork was still there. I was sleeping in a room that I remember as a little kid going into, that had all of her art supplies and some of the artwork that was not out, that was on shelves, and so just having that continuity from going there as a kid to actually getting to live there and see that artwork on the walls was really special. Oh yeah.
So that's, I guess, where I come in. When Gary and I were dating, he said to me, one day you should just come over to where I'm living, my grandmother's apartment, it's your art. And I just didn't know what to think of that, and it was unbelievable. I was blown away. And I remember, didn't she say when she had written in the memory book that your mom made for our wedding, with the recipes and stuff, she had said, I just thought she was coming to meet the artist. She didn't think that I was really, we were really serious or anything at the time. And I remember thinking about this bungalow colony scenes when Gary and I were dating also that summer of 2009. We both had grandmothers who went to bungalow colonies with survivors, and it was something that really bonded us together. We visited both of our grandmothers, at one point we were there together for a little bit. And I remember she made a kugel. The kugel was something that nobody's mentioned her yet, but her kugel was her signature kugel. It was salt and pepper, and it was cooked on the stovetop. This was her thing. She didn't really use the oven so much. It was more like the stovetop, and that was really special. We have paintings in our home of hers that are really incredibly special. We realized a few years into our marriage, we're married now about 12 and a half years, that we actually happen to have throughout our dining room the painting of her Passover pots. We have her Rosh Hashanah lighting candles charcoal drawing. We have her Kreplach painting for Shavuot. And we also have, Josie, do you want to say in your bedroom, right? What did you have?
I have one of Bubby Toby's pictures in my bedroom.
She did, and we moved recently closer to my in-laws in South Orange, New Jersey. But the year she passed away, Gary and I actually ran the marathon together, and we put shirts together with the picture of her. I don't know if you've seen, but of her kind of walking to school without. We always used to hear stories from our grandparents of, I walked miles to school in the snow without shoes on. And so we put, running through burrows for Bubby on our shirts and put a nice picture of her and her the dates of her life on the back. So that was really amazing. And I'll say that just having briefly looked at the exhibit before, the Passover section was really, and we've been talking a lot about Passover here, I think really meaningful to me because I've been, at 2 seders with Toby at my in-laws' house. And I remember one thing, Lily, that she used to say, she'd say, Tata, I want to ask the fear kasha. She used to do, right? We would go around and then the Finklers used to have like a lot of friends over, and one was living in Japan, I think, at the time, like for a little bit. And like he used to kind of say it in Japanese and it was just like we'd go around and everybody would say it in different languages. And so that was her part of it. And there's one other thing I wanted to add. So Olivia, her middle name is Toby. She is named after, she's the namesake, her namesake she's named after Toby Fluek. And at her baby naming, we actually did an art theme because we felt that, it would be really important to uphold her name, her memory, and we even had little easels on the tables with, what was on that? I forgot. Oh, pictures of Libby. And so not that long ago, do you want to tell the story, Libby?
Sure. So one day, I was at home and I think we had no school that day. It was a snow day. And so we had this like online thing, art class, where you could like look at it and then they would like show it step by step how to do it, make it. And I thought I wanted to make, there's this art thing with like a hot chocolate cup mug. So I wanted to do that one. So I tried to find something to color it with, and I found these pastels lying around somewhere. So I thought it would be good to use them. So after I used them, my parents, I think, told me that they were my great grandmothers. So I thought that was really special.
It was really special. I said to Gary, are these your puppies? They were very old and like, kind of like, yeah. And he asked Lily and she said, they're my mothers. And we just thought that was a really wonderful way to carry on Toby's legacy. I wanted to share that story.
That's a perfect story to kind of come together. I want to, before I give you the last word, Lily, I wanted to see if anybody had questions for any of the Finklers.
Oh, I don't have a question, but I have, I think, first book, actually. We are cousins somehow. We don't exactly know how. I think we just figured it out tonight. And I had a book from 1990. And today my friend opened the book. I didn't realize there is a letter in here that I'll read. Wow. Maybe I'll cry.
Judy, turn around and face the camera.
Well, it's really a tribute to you. So my late husband, we believe we're cousins. Yeah. We believe that Toby's grandmother and my late husband's great grandfather were siblings. My last name is Parnas, and Toby's grandmother was a Parnas. My husband also was an artist. And so this is dated October 28th, 1990. Dear Barry and Judy, it was lovely to see you all this summer. Well, my dream came true. Here is the book. I hope my memories will help you to tell your children of your parents' background environment, which was somewhat similar, and of the dark years in our history they should remember. Since you wanted to be my first customer, the book is $12. I will save your first $1. With all my love, Toby and Max. Kisses for the children.
That's nice. That was inside there. Oh, wow.
That was even more perfect. Lily, did you want to say a final word?
I gotta make sure I can see because I'm crying here. Okay, I'm gonna read this, I'm sorry. My parents were thrilled when I married Steve, and even especially when my boys, David and Gary, were born. They were the joys of their life. In her book Memories, part of the dedication she wrote, "To my dear grandchildren, David and Gary, knowing you will always remember." This is when they were 10 and 7. Thank you for living up to her wishes. Boys, you're amazing. It's very gratifying to see that Bubby and Zadie had such a strong positive influence on their grandchildren, and to see how both of them, together with their wives, Katie and Aviva, have passed on the remembrance to their children. I'm so very proud of my grandchildren, Max, Livy, Judah, and Josie, who are the joys of our life. Thank you, Rakhmiel, Professor Peltz, for encouraging my mother and being a good friend and supporter of her work and her story, and recognizing the value of her art and teaching about life before the war and in the Holocaust education. You brought her great joy with your film, Toby Sunshine, which took over 6 years to make and was truly a labor of love. Your website, AliveTobySunshine.com, highlights her life and her artwork, and my family and I appreciate how special the film and the website are in conveying my mother's legacy. Thank you, and I know I'm going to miss some people, so I apologize. I hit them. Thank you, Erin, Ursula, Miranda, and the Florida Holocaust Museum for this beautiful exhibit, amazing, and for honoring and remembering my mother's and passing on her artistic legacy. When I donated her artwork and all her photos and papers, and I think there was a lot of them.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, you've only seen this.
Hundreds of objects.
Yes, and when I donated this to the Florida Holocaust Museum, I knew that it would be a best place to preserve her artwork and share her story. Thank you for organizing and curating her art. It's exciting that so many people, because we were here this afternoon, so many people are able to see her work, access her work, and see it on their website too. Thank you to all my family and friends who are live streaming in. Some of you knew my parents, and I appreciate the stories you shared. Thank you to my cousin Judy, who came down from New Jersey to attend this program, and my machatanist of Howard Klein, who happened to be in the area and is here for the program. And I'd like to thank all of you here who are here at the Florida Holocaust Museum tonight to see this exhibit and program. By your presence and interest, you ensure that the world will always remember. Thank you.
Please have some more snacks, and the exhibition is on the second floor. If you haven't seen it already, just don't take your drinks downstairs and your food downstairs. But please, please check out the exhibition.
Thank you for coming.